Okay, hello and good evening, everybody, and welcome to the UK Space Agency's live show this evening. I'm Libby Jackson. I work at the UK Space Agency and I am the Human Exploration Programme Manager. So I have the fantastic responsibility of looking after the UK's interests in human exploration. And of course, that means astronauts. I'm delighted that we're joined tonight by Tim Peake, our own British astronaut, the second, of course, after Helen Sharman. And we're here to talk about the application that is open now from the European Space Agency for new astronauts. And we want you to apply to that. The UK is a member of the European Space Agency. Always worth noting, it's not an EU organisation, so we're still very much a part of it after EU exit. And so you are eligible. And we're here, as I say, to answer all those questions. So welcome, Tim. Thanks for being here this evening.
Hello, Libby, and it's great to speak with you tonight. It's going to be great to speak to everybody who's joining us this evening. I can see the questions already starting to come in, which is great. So the point of tonight, of course, is for you listening and watching, is to answer any questions that you might have about the astronaut selection process, and to hopefully give you some advice and some insights into what it's going to be like with your career with ESA.
Absolutely. So keep those questions coming. We're going to get to them. But first, I'm going to ask Tim just a few questions. And I wanted to start off actually with, well, what is this job that we're busy asking everybody to apply for? Because I know that a lot of people will see you in space and they've seen you on television and on social media. But I know that there's a lot more to it than that. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you have been doing these last 10 or 11 years?
Sure, yeah, there is a lot more to it than that. And the other thing is you have to be completely comfortable about what you're going to be doing when you're not flying to space and when you're not specifically training for a mission. And let's talk about that a little bit, because, you know, when you join the space agency, there's no guarantee that you're going to get a mission. We want to take people of exceptional caliber who are in the prime of their life, at the top of their career, and we're going to, you know, take you into the astronaut training program. But you're asking people to sacrifice what they've been doing before, from whichever background they come from, and join the space agency in moving human space exploration forward, at the risk that you might actually not fly to space. So you've got to be completely comfortable of what you're going into, be passionate about it, to be contributing to this team that is forging ahead with our space exploration programs. So as an astronaut, you know, initially when you're selected, it is always going to be focused on the mission that's coming up. So it is about your basic training, and we can talk a bit more about basic training later. And then once you've graduated, you're then into an advanced training phase. So this is where you might do a little bit of extra training, like medical training, for example, mechanical engineering. You might go and get qualified as a Eurocom, something I did quite early on, working with you, of course, Libby, as the flight director, and we were sat together on the control center, Columbus Control Center. That's a really important job for astronauts to do, because that means you interact with the space station on a daily basis. You get to see how the operations planning system works. You get to see what a day on board the ISS is like, and you get to realize what you're going to be doing as an astronaut, and that's really important. You also get to know and get to see the impact of anything that you say on board, you know, the snowball effect that it can have back in mission control. And that's really important for an astronaut to grasp, the whole network, the whole team, what's happening on a global scale. But then also you get to support the whole space program. You might be working on a design team for SpaceX, docking systems. Maybe you're looking at propulsion systems. Maybe you're helping on the lunar lander. You know, maybe you're working in a scientific research area. There are a number of different things that you can get involved in. And I would say there's something for everybody, wherever your passion lies, whether it's in science, whether it's in engineering, whether it's as a test pilot who then loves getting involved in the test and design element of something. But you've got to be comfortable in all of that, because it's not just going to be about, you know, your flying to space. It's going to be about your full contribution to the whole program, the whole space exploration program.
So let's think for a minute, and I know we can see it got hundreds of people out there know that, they are comfortable with that, they want to be an astronaut. We've got to talk about the minimum requirements and how people are going to go about applying. And the first thing to say is that the applications are through the European Space Agency. So if you haven't been to their website yet, go. There's a fantastic website with details, with a handbook on how to apply, and the links, of course, to the application form. And when you apply, you're going to have to put 5 things there. You're going to have to put a CV in Europass format. You're going to have a Class 2 medical certificate. You're going to need a copy of your passport, a motivation letter that we'll talk about. I can see we've got lots of questions coming in about that already, and to answer a questionnaire. And that questionnaire confirms that you meet the minimum requirements. And now, one of the things that I hope everybody listening realizes that those minimum requirements aren't perhaps as strenuous as you might think, but they're there for good reason. And Tim, you know the process well. Wondered if you could say a bit about those requirements, what it is people have to have, and why they're important for being an astronaut.
Yeah, so if I'm just reading through some of these questions as well about the process, and let's take it from step one, the application process, and I would advise anybody, do take it one step at a time. So we can talk about later stages of the selection process this evening, but let's just come up about the application form and getting those essential things first of all. Obviously, ESA need to get to know you. And they need to be able to select a certain number of candidates. Who knows whether it's 20%, maybe it's 15% of those application forms will get invited to the very first stage of selection process. So you want to be in the top 20% of application forms that are looked at. There are a set number of things that are just yes, no answers in the application form. You just have to simply be honest and tick the box there. Then there are other areas which you can expand upon. And then there's the motivational letter, which of course is something that I can see a lot of questions coming up already. This is slightly different to when I applied in 2008. In 2008, we had really what was a motivation letter, but it was broken down into 3 questions, each question with a maximum of 750 words. And those questions were, why do you want to become an astronaut? What do you think the role of an astronaut is? And then giving a little bit of information about yourself, including strengths and weaknesses. So I guess our motivation letter was broken down into those kind of 3 paragraphs. If I was writing a motivation letter today, and Libby and I were talking about this earlier, we don't have the right answers. We're not going to be part of the team that is judging these application forms. But you simply don't want to write an essay, quite obviously. If there are going to be 8,000 applications that are written, you need to shine in a very short, concise, clear statement. Certainly, my personal motivation letter would be no more than 2 sides of A4, and it would be the absolute top hitting reasons as to why I think, I should be an excellent candidate to be an astronaut, and how I would contribute to this global international team. But these are the reasons why ESA need this information, and the requirements that we have up there on the screen is because they need to be able to draw forward those 20% say of candidates to round 1 of the selection process, and they need to know that they've got the absolute best 20% out of those. So you need to get everything in line, everything clearly in order. Make sure that you make it as easy as possible for the European Space Agency to pick you as one of the top 20%. No mistakes, no errors, absolutely everything as requested and as documented in the application process.
So those minimum requirements that you need to make sure that you're ticking off there, you have to have a master's degree in a scientific or a technical subject, but you can also have a medical degree. On the application form now, it's been very clear that you can have a medical degree and qualifications, and I know that here in the UK there's been some questions about medical degrees because they're bachelor's degrees, and looking at the application form, that looks pretty clear that that's okay. You can also have test pilot qualifications, which is what Tim had and still has, I should say. you need to be generally fit and healthy. And I know that I can see that's one of the questions coming through. Tim, perhaps could you tell us a bit about what fit and healthy means, really? You know, do we all need to be superhuman here? Were you able to swim the channel when you applied?
Yeah, so don't worry about it. Don't sweat it. You know, I would say one of my words of advice would be to get in shape. The reason being is that a lot of the training that you're going to do is physically arduous. We spend a lot of time scuba diving. That can be tiring. 6 hours underwater in a spacesuit is hard work. And so the fitter you are, the healthier you are, the easier you will find it. And you'll actually be able to focus all of your attention onto being brilliant at spacewalking, as opposed to 20% of your attention being focused on how exhausted you are. You don't want that. You want to be in good shape so that you can do the best that you can do during training. But no, we're not after Olympic athletes. You do not have to be superhuman. You have to be of, you know, an average fitness for somebody of your age. Now, I enjoy running. I get out, you know, 3-4 times a week, you know, 7K a time, and I do a bit of strength training as well, just to keep myself fit and in shape. And I would just encourage anybody to just, you know, exercise 3 or 4 times a week, get in shape, but don't sweat the physical requirements. You know, if you're, you know, of average fitness for your age, then you'll be fine.
That's great to hear. And related to that, there's another point on the requirements which concerns languages. Now, the European Space Agency say that you have to be fluent in English and that another language is a plus. And I know on the application form, one of the points is the language things. And we wanted to touch on that a bit because, of course, here in the UK, perhaps language qualifications are not something we all know about all the time. The requirements are the CEFR levels, which are the so European levels, and they're looking for B1 in that second language if you have it, which I think is equivalent to an AS level. But Tim, you could say a bit more because, of course, you had language requirements and have had to learn Russian as a part of your training.
That's right. Yeah. And again, what ESA is trying to do with this overall selection process is pick the people who are going to be the least risk to them. They want to know. So I will speak a bit more about languages, but this helps actually. Languages helps to really identify what they're after. ESA want to know that you're somebody who can work well in a team. You're not going to be a risk when it comes to time away from family. You're not going to be a risk when it comes to working in another country, moving your family to another country. You're not going to be a risk when it comes to having to learn Russian. You're not going to be a risk when it comes to having to learn all the technical aspects of the International Space Station. And so your job is to show ESA that you are somebody who is capable of doing all of this, and also somebody who is willing to put themselves through it, to put themselves out, and to make these sacrifices along the way. So from a point of view of language, yes, you have this criteria, the CEFR B1 category, and it is advisable, it's not mandatory, but clearly it's in the application form. If something's in the application form, then it's going to be weighted, it's going to be looked at. And the stronger your application form is, then the more chance you've got of being in the top 20%. So absolutely, you know, if you think, say you had a GCSE French, but actually since then you think that you've improved on that and actually you've now upped yourself to what you would consider an AS level, then absolutely, you know, you fit that criteria. So you know, this will be something that will be questioned when you come to your interview stage, and in fact they may well ask you some questions in the language that you've chosen. So you do have to, of course, be honest about your ability, but at the same time, you know, they're not asking for much above a GCSE level.
That's very helpful and useful, I think. So let's carry on with working our way through the requirements as well. I've seen some questions come through about age, and there is an age limit on this. You have to be under 50. And that's because it takes 5-10 years for an astronaut to be trained. It's a big investment from the European Space Agency, from the member state space agencies like the UK Space Agency. And we want to make sure that the astronauts who are selected have got time for a career ahead of them. And that's what drives the 50 age. The minimum requirement is that there is no minimum requirement, but you have to have 3 years of professional experience on top of your master's degree. And so that's going to put a lower bound on it, but there's no official lowest age. And so I think that covers those questions. The next place I'd like to go to now, I think we talked a little bit about fitness, but I want to talk about fitness in a wider sense, because for this call, it's hugely exciting, as well as the astronaut call. ESA are looking for somebody to start what is a feasibility pilot study at the minute, but to get somebody with a disability into space, have a meaningful, proper career, to be part of the astronaut call in their para-astronaut project. And that's wonderfully exciting. Tim, from all your work, I know you'll have you've served. You'll have come across people who've been injured in many different walks of life. I think this is a fantastic opportunity to start opening the door to a wider wider number of people who can be astronauts.
Yeah, it is. It's really encouraging. It's the direction that we need to be going in, and I'm really proud, actually, of ESA of being the first agency to take a step in this direction. You know, when it comes to people with disabilities, as I think Samantha Cristoforetti put it brilliantly when she said, "We're all disabled in space. No human being was designed to operate in that environment." This is a technical challenge that we need to overcome. It's an engineering challenge. Currently, our spacecraft, our space station, is not designed for people with disabilities. So we simply need to make sure that it's a safe working environment for that individual and for the crew as a whole. And that's why this pilot study is being reasonably limited in the scope of disabilities, looking at just lower leg disabilities. But the intention, of course, is this is the first part of this study, which will be opened up, and hopefully as we go down this route, then it means that a much broader range of disabilities will be accepted for future astronaut selection programs. Suffice to say, of course, that you have to comply with all of the standard criteria that ESA are asking for. But it's a brilliant way of you know, I think ESA are doing a fantastic job with this project study, and of course this is about selecting astronauts to be career astronauts as well, which is fantastic.
Yeah, so if you're out there and you meet those criteria, all of them, but have a lower leg disability or of short stature, go ahead, apply, give it a shot, because it would be fantastic to see a Brit come through that part of the application process as well. So you've gone through all of that, and we'll get on to the questions and talk more about what happens through the selection process. But I just wanted to jump ahead right to the end of the minute, because we do have to be honest, for all of this, for the thousands of applications that we know the European Space Agency are going to get from right across Europe. There are 22 different countries that are member states of ESA. We're only going to end up with a handful of astronauts being selected at the end, and some reserve astronauts, hopefully from each country, who will see serve. So the odds are small. And what I just wanted to talk about a little bit was, well, what's going to happen to everybody else, and what do you get from going through that process? Why should you even apply if the odds are so small? And Tim, I know you've got some thoughts on just what going through the process means and meant to you and would mean to everybody.
Yeah, and it's fair to say, when I applied, I didn't think I was going to get selected. Who does, when you know that you're up against 8,000 other candidates? That doesn't mean to say that you don't have self-belief or self-confidence. Yes, of course you do, but realistically, when you look at it from a statistical point of view, you're going to think, okay, you know, there's a large chance here that I'm not going to be selected, so why bother? Well, you could apply that to anything. Personally speaking, I think the selection process in itself is an amazing thing to be involved in. It gives you an insight into what we're doing in the space industry. It's an incredible process to go and meet other people who are involved in that as well, to learn a lot more about the space agency. And for myself as a test pilot, it really is the cutting edge of what we do in the test flying industry. So actually, I kind of viewed the selection process as professional development in itself. So you have to be comfortable, obviously, going through the process, knowing what the odds are. But believe in yourself every step of the way. Absolutely, go in with confidence, because if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't have that self-confidence, then how is ESA going to have confidence in you? So there's absolutely no problem in going for it with self-confidence, but at the same time understanding what the odds are. I think that's a very reasonable approach.
Absolutely. And it's worth saying at this point, you don't have to have any space industry experience to apply to be an astronaut. The master's degree that is required has to be in a scientific or technical discipline, because astronauts are involved in science and technology all the time. They are the scientists on board the space station, 250 experiments all the time happening up there. They're the plumbers who have to fix the toilet when it goes wrong. We need these scientific and technical skills, but there are, of course, a wide selection of degrees that lead you there. And there are an even wider selection of jobs available in the space industry today. Astronauts are just the very top of the pyramid of tens of thousands of people here in the UK, hundreds of thousands of people right around the world. It's a truly global industry, in careers ranging from lawyers to astronauts, to journalists, to people who manufacture spacecraft, to policy people who work at the UK Space Agency. There are accountants, there are medical doctors involved in things. You name it, there's a job for you. So if you're looking at this and go, yeah, I want to be an astronaut, but you don't make it through to the end, come and consider the space industry, because there are so many fantastic roles up and down the UK, around Europe. The industry employs 40,000 people at the minute now. That's expected to double more or less in the next 10 years. We need skilled people, so come and join us. So that, I think, has covered all the main things we wanted to run through now. And I want to get into the questions because they're streaming in and there's many, many specifics there. And I'm going to scroll through and see where we can get to here. Now, let's see. Well, no, I tell you what, before we go there, I'll find some to ask. Let's go back to Tim. Once you're through the first stage, you've got through to that 20%, what's going to happen next? What can people expect?
Yeah, so, okay, yeah, Libby, whilst you're looking at some other questions, let's talk generally about the selection process. Application form statistically is the hardest phase to pass because that's where the biggest filter is. And we've spoken a bit about that. Now you're into the stage where ESA still need to just screen out those people who simply don't have what they call the hard skills, really. And they're also termed non-trainable skills. Having said that, some of them you can improve your performance before you go. Things like concentration, memory retention, spatial awareness, coordination, a little bit of maths, English language, for example. These will all be tested in one intense day, probably all computer-based testing as well. And this is in order to just tick the box as to, do we have candidates who can accomplish these skills? Now, in terms of what they're looking for, it's somebody who doesn't necessarily excel in all areas, but somebody who can make the standard in all areas. So they're looking to screen out people who will dip below in any one area. And when I say about, there's a way of perhaps training some of these skills. For example, in our selection process, ESA sent us some sample questions, the concentration tests, for example. And by doing them a few times over, it gives you a flavor of what's to come. So if you get invited through to that round, ESA sends you some information beforehand. Again, give yourself the best chance possible. Have a think about what tests might be coming up. Have a think about how you could possibly improve your score on that. And then after that hard skills testing, really the remainder of the selection process is all about your soft skills, who you are as a person. It's about how you work as a team, how you communicate with other people, what are your leadership skills, but also how you can support other people in a followership role as well. And there'll be plenty of opportunity to show your strengths in these areas. There'll be all sorts of problems, complex problems, some problems that have no solution at all, but you're expected to work together as a team under stressful conditions and come up with the best solution possible. And how do you cope? Are you somebody who really feels the pressure and closes down, or are you somebody who's able to just take a step back, think clearly, and come up with the best solution out of a difficult set of circumstances. These are the kind of things that ESA are trying to get to. They're trying to find out who you are as a person. All throughout the whole selection process, I should emphasize, there will be some sort of psychological profiling as well. Most of this will probably be questionnaire based, but because the selection process is run over such a long period of time, there's really no place to hide. You know, ESA's going to get to know you very, very well. And that's the whole point. You know, they want to take somebody, as I said before, somebody who is the lowest risk. They want to know you really well and know that you'll be able to cope. And that's only fair on you. You know, it'd be the worst thing possible to select somebody at the end of the day and then put them into an environment that they can't cope with. So the soft skills will be, there'll be a phase there, probably 2 days, where you'll be invited to attend a number of different tests with teams of people. And then after that, there'll be a medical phase. And the medical tends to be left late in the day. And the reason is because obviously medical testing is expensive, but also it's invasive. And you don't really want a large number of people going through unnecessary medical checks. Our medical lasted 5 days, and no stone is left unturned. But you know, you get a bit of a flavor of what life as an astronaut is going to be like. When we go up to the space station, we do these life science experiments. You know, rarely a day goes by when you haven't got a needle in you somewhere, whether it's giving blood or, you know, maybe it's a urine sample today or a fecal sample, who knows what. I think as astronauts, almost every orifice other than my ear, I think, was probed for some form of sample at some time during my 6 months in space. So the medical week, it's actually a great week where you can really bond with other people who are going through the selection process as well, because there's no competitiveness during the medical week. You're either going to make it or not. Some of the biggest screens there are cardiovascular and eyesight. They tend to be the areas where most people fall down on. And again, what ESA are looking for here are people who are low risk, people who are not going to have a problem or minimal risk of having a problem on a long duration space flight. And then after the medical process, we're into the interview phase. It might be 2 rounds, it might be 3 rounds, which is where you're now in front of ESA, high-level management, the Director General at some point, and where they get an opportunity to meet you. And that's where you get an opportunity to really shine and to show ESA who you are and what you're capable of.
Yeah, it's a long process, and the selection the results of the selection won't be announced until September 2022 next year. So it's 18 months. So don't expect things to move quickly. Each step needs to take its time. But ESA have said that they will let you know at each stage if you're successful in getting through to the next one. So there shouldn't be any hanging around, waiting and wondering. There should be good communication throughout. And I know ESA will be working their best to do all of that. Now, I've been looking through the questions. We've had some fantastic questions. Thank you all so much for being out there. Do keep them coming in. We've got a bit more time. One of them, I think, which is really interesting, has come from Heather. And she's asking if we can talk about when the next selection is going to be. She said, can we speculate on the chances of another selection in 10 years' time? I think that's really interesting, particularly for younger people who might be tuned in right now and who are listening to this thinking, not this time, but next time. And when is that next time? And certainly from a UK Space Agency point of view, I can tell you that it's a very exciting time for exploration at the minute. The UK is playing its part. We have already placed contracts for the first modules to be built for the Lunar Gateway. This is going to be a very small space station that's going to be orbiting the moon. It will likely be the destination for some of the astronauts, possibly all of the astronauts that are getting selected in this call now. And those missions will be happening over the next 10, 20 years. But we are putting in place that infrastructure that will continue to see exploration happen. We'll see humans returning to the surface of the moon. And what space agencies share as a horizon goal is that one day humans are going to go to Mars. And we're taking steps to get there. And so I do think that we will see more selections in the coming years. Whether that's in 6 years or 10 years or 12 years is hard to guess right now. You look back historically, European Space Agency selections have been about every 10 years or so, but times are changing. The number of missions is increasing. And the number of countries involved in the human exploration program within ESA are growing as well. So it's hard to put an exact timeline on it, but I am certain there will be more selections in the future. And Tim, I wonder if you had any words for the young generation out there listening who maybe aren't applying this time, but want to apply next time. What should
No,
they
it's a
do
great
now?
question. It's a great question, Heather. And the short answer is don't worry. This will not be your last chance. What ESA want to move to is a new model where there are more frequent astronaut selections. We're looking at 4, maybe 6 in this selection process. But we're, as Libby said, we're in a new era. And just moving to this model of reserve astronaut is some way of compensating for this new era of space exploration where more missions are coming up and there is an option to fly on commercial transportation as well as through the space agency. So for example, a member state may decide to fly an astronaut on a one-off mission, and if they happen to have that nationality in the reserve pool, then they may well purchase a single flight via the European Space Agency from the reserve pool of astronauts on that mission. So the number of missions that are coming up in the future is increasing, and different options as well. It could be a short duration on the ISS, it could be a long duration, or it could be an Artemis mission. And so we're going to need a faster turnover of astronauts for different missions at different times. So I think it's going to be a really exciting time. This will not be, it will not be another 10, 12 years before ESA have another selection process after this.
There you go. Now, there's been a lot of questions through the chat asking about the specifics of the application form. And one of them I can see from Lucy, I think Lucy Rogers picks up on this a lot. There's a lot of these how many times a year question. Is it over the career? What about in the pandemic? I've not got any specific advice on this. Tim, from your experiences, can you add anything on how these sorts of questions on the form might be best interpreted?
So on the forms, I would just say that, give yourself the best chance that you possibly can. Again, it comes down to this weighting process. If there's any ambiguity on there, then, you can always ask a question and try and get an answer from the European Space Agency. But if that's not possible, if nothing comes back from the European Space Agency, then I would say give yourself the best chance, because you'll have opportunity during the selection process to clear up any ambiguity and actually to present your strength to the space agency. So don't give yourself the lowest chance at the very first stage. Give yourself the best chance that you possibly have got. And clearly the last year has been very difficult for people, and so there are mitigating circumstances in place as to why people may not have completed something that they'd set their horizons on, or gained the necessary operational experience, for example, that they'd hoped. So I would say, give yourself the best fighting chance you've got in your application form.
That's very, very good advice. It's definitely going to be that first cut. I can't find the question now, but somebody has asked is it going to be computer based, that first cut? I don't know the answer. We don't know the answer, but you know that there are going to be thousands of applications. And so you've got to give yourself that best chance. It is superb advice. The other piece of advice I wanted to share was one that Samantha Cristoforetti gave in the press conference, which you can find online, worth going back to the European Space Agency on their YouTube channel. She said, if you don't let you decide if you want to apply, let ESA decide. And so if you're not sure about it, go for it. Go and get in there. I'm still desperately trying to see some more questions. There are so many coming in. Tim, have you spotted any that you want to answer?
I'll have a look in a minute, but in terms of that weighting process as well, there'll be an element of a computer-based assessment on the yes/no, which is simply giving a score to a certain application form. But every application form is going to be looked at by an individual, by a human, who's going to read your form, read the areas where you're adding information, and certainly your motivational letter, your CV, etc. So, there are certainly areas where you can shine in terms of when a human picks up your application form and reads it and thinks, okay, we've got an outstanding candidate here. In addition to the weighting that the other algorithms might give it. So yeah, the motivational letter is clearly going to be important. And somebody had said about what do you mean by attention to detail, and that's really where I mean attention to detail. Grammatical errors, spelling errors, silly things. You can't afford to have any of that. Get somebody else to check over your form. You can read your own form 20 times and not spot the error that's glaring you in the face. Get advice from friends, from colleagues, from people who have been through, similar experiences, and give yourself the best opportunity as possible. There's no rush for this. We've got until the end of May, so take your time over it, and give yourself the best chance that you've got.
Yeah, I think we're going to be nearing the end soon, because we've exhausted probably most of the questions, but we've covered, I think, looking through most of the questions people have had, but now is your chance, get them in. There's one from Will Fawcett that I think it's worth covering. And it says, hi Tim, how much does your current job matter? You mentioned that people towards the top of their career. I'm a physicist, but I've considered other options. Would it look bad to leave? I don't think anyone should be leaving their current job for this at the moment, but where it comes from is one of the great things. We're looking for many, many more broad people. Tim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely, we are. I mean, you look at just the selection in 2008. So we had, engineers, we had airline pilot, test pilot, geophysicists, all sorts of people. And when you combine that with similar astronauts who are being selected for the Japanese Space Agency, the Canadians, and NASA, all at the same time, a really diverse bunch, and so I think that everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and part of where we're moving to with astronauts is going for a diverse team, more so than in the early years of spaceflight. When you consider what a crew composition needs to be for a lunar mission and a Mars mission, it's going to be very different from those early days of Mercury, Apollo, and Gemini. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. It's really important to understand what your strengths are and to play to them, but be realistic about your weaknesses as well, and think about how you can improve those areas, and how you can address them if they're raised during the selection process as well.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right, the last questions I think are coming in. There's various people asking, I've got asthma, I've got dyslexia, will that affect you? My advice is go and look through the requirements from ESA. As Tim said, give yourself the best shot. They are much broader than you might imagine. And if you're not in it, you haven't got a shot. But Tim, have you got any specific comments on things like asthma, dyslexia, and the other of these things? Eyesight, people have mentioned.
No, absolutely. Again, I mean, it really comes back to your bit of advice there from Samantha. Let ESA decide that. Get yourself in front of ESA and let them decide that. I noticed somebody else there mentioned about having a metal pin from a broken leg. Absolutely not. No problem at all. There's nothing that stops you from being, fulfilling the fitness criteria there. So yes, ESA have put down the requirements in terms of the pre-medical class 2 equivalent that you need to get. Over and above that, let the medical week sort that out. So yeah, no, I would say again, give yourself a fighting chance. In terms of dyslexia. No, if you've got a master's and 3 years of operational experience and you've got dyslexia, doesn't matter. Fantastic, well done. You've clearly shown a fantastic aptitude to being able to learn, and there are thousands of people with dyslexia who have no problems whatsoever in many different operational areas. So no, I wouldn't see that as a problem.
I think we're going to close it there. It's been a superb session. Thank you so much for all of your questions. A reminder that you have to apply through the European Space Agency website. All the details on the requirements, how to apply, where to apply are there. The closing date is the 28th of May. So you've got some time, but do not miss it, because if you miss it, there's not going to be another chance for a few years. Remember that you have to submit a motivation letter, a CV in Europass format, and it is worth looking up that Europass format as what ESA have requested. It's easy to find through a search engine. You need your motivation letter, you need a Class 2 medical certificate, and you need a copy of your passport. Tim, over to you for final advice.
Yeah, so this is a process to be enjoyed as well. I certainly thoroughly enjoyed it back in 2008, and like I said, I took an awful lot from the process as well. So everybody going through the process, embrace it, enjoy it for what it is, give yourself a fighting chance, have as much self-confidence and self-belief as you can. And as I said, pay attention to detail, do some research. Nobody likes going into something not really knowing what they're getting into. I felt a little bit like that, even coming from a test flying background, I didn't really know a huge amount about space. I did an awful lot of research, and by the time I got invited to the very first phase, I actually knew all about ESA, about the space programs, the kind of things that have been going on various different missions. There's an awful lot of information out there on the internet. So try and put time aside in the evenings, if you can, just to do a bit of research and to arm yourself with as much information as possible, because it will make you feel an awful lot more comfortable about the environment that you're getting into, and that will make you more relaxed about the whole process too. And the more relaxed you are, the more information you have, then the better you're going to come across. So I think that really is the key, is start finding out as much as you can about this process.
Good luck, everybody out there. Do get your applications in. I'm really excited to see what comes out the other end, who comes out the other end, whether we'll see another British astronaut selected in this contingent, and hopefully I'll get to work with them, whoever they are, in the future. Do also remember that there are thousands of jobs out in the space industry. And if you get all the way through this process and you aren't one of the people who are selected, but you're excited by the space industry, come and have a look, see what other jobs there are there. There are, I know, because I've been in them in mission control, I'm in one of them now. There are lots of other jobs supporting human spaceflight and supporting space, something that we all live with every day, from weather satellites to communications. Without space, we wouldn't be talking to you right now. Thanks so much, Tim. Thank you to you all out there for your questions, and we wish you a fantastic evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much indeed, guys. Good luck to everybody. Good luck.